Rafael Denz thought he had found the love of his life in Lunara Vena, but within 24 hours of their lavish wedding, she vanished without a trace. As Detective Simra Holt dug deeper, she uncovered a chilling truth. Lunara wasn't a woman at all, but a master con artist named Layer Vena, who had used romance as a weapon to infiltrate Rafael's world, steal his secrets, and disappear forever. The wedding of Rafael Denz and Lunara Vena was the kind of event people talked about for weeks. It took place at an exclusive coastal resort owned by Rafael himself, where every detail had been meticulously arranged. From imported orchids to a string quartet flown in from Vienna, the ceremony radiated perfection. Guests were dazzled not just by the setting but by the bride herself, Lunara, who moved with grace and spoke with an accent that no one could quite place. Her presence was magnetic, and for Rafael, she seemed like everything he had ever wanted. Their romance had been fast. They met 6 months earlier at a luxury spa retreat, where Lunara claimed to be recovering from personal loss and looking for peace. Rafael, already emotionally distant after a failed engagement the year before, found comfort in her calm demeanor and mysterious aura. She never revealed much about her past, only hinting at pain and isolation. Rafael never pushed. He found her. Silence is elegant, her secrets alluring. Despite the whirlwind nature of their courtship, Rafael felt certain he had found someone different. Someone untouched by the greed and deception he'd faced in his business world. Lunara refused gifts, never asked for money, and always insisted on paying her own way when they traveled. In a life filled with people trying to take something from him, she felt like the first person who asked for nothing. But not everyone was convinced. Rafael's sister Rafael Denz had watched her brother fall too quickly. She had a quiet, cautious nature, and Lunara set off alarms from the beginning. It wasn't any one thing. It was little inconsistencies. A story about growing up in France contradicted later by a reference to an Argentinian childhood. A scar on her arm, she said, came from a childhood accident, but later attributed to a hiking trip. Her reluctance to attend any medical appointments, even for minor allergies, only deepened Farah's suspicions. When she brought her concerns to Rafael, he dismissed them as paranoia. He was in love, and Farah, in his eyes, had always been overly protective. On the day of the wedding, Lunara wore a custom-made gown that shimmered in the sunlight. Her makeup was flawless, her movements fluid, her vows poetic. Guests wept as the couple exchanged rings under a floral arch facing the sea. To the crowd, it seemed like a fairy tale. But behind the smiles and champagne toasts, an invisible clock was ticking. Lunara avoided any physical closeness with Rafael in public. While Rafael chalked it up to her modesty or cultural background, others began to whisper. Camden Rowe, Rafael's best friend since childhood and best man at the wedding, noticed Lunara flinch slightly when Rafael tried to kiss her forehead during photos. She laughed it off and redirected attention elsewhere, but the discomfort lingered. Still, no one dared disrupt the celebration. The wedding evening unfolded beautifully. A slow dance, a candlelit dinner, and finally the ceremonial farewell as guests departed, leaving the couple alone in their honeymoon suite. That was the last anyone would see of Lunara. While Rafael slept, exhausted from the emotional day, Lunara quietly slipped out of bed, dressed in neutral clothing, and walked out of the resort. No one stopped her. No one questioned her. The cameras caught her figure fading into the night, unaware that within hours her entire identity would unravel. The next morning, Rafael woke up to an empty bed and a silent phone. At first, he assumed she was at the spa or the cafe. But as hours passed and calls went unanswered, concern turned into panic. Staff scoured the premises, but Lunara had vanished. Without a trace, no belongings, no message, nothing. Rafael reported her missing by mid-afternoon. Local police responded quickly, and the first step was reviewing the hotel's surveillance footage. When they found the video of Lunara leaving alone in the middle of the night, the officers asked Rafael a series of routine questions. When they requested identification documents for Lunara, things quickly took a sharp turn. The name matched, but the photo had subtle anomalies. Her birth certificate didn't align with national records. What began as a romantic mystery now started to smell like something else, entirely fraud. Within 24 hours of the wedding, the storybook bride was gone. But the truth she left behind was darker than anyone could have imagined. Rafael Denz sat alone in his honeymoon suite as sunlight streamed through the balcony windows. The bed was made, untouched since the night before, and the silence was heavy. His phone sat beside him, its screen dark, offering no answers. Hours had passed since he first noticed Lunara's absence. What began as confusion quickly grew into dread. The wedding had been just the day before. They were supposed to fly to Santorini for their honeymoon that morning. But Lunara was gone. No note, no explanation, no trace. Resort staff scoured the grounds after Rafael raised the alarm. They checked the spa, the private beach, every corner of the luxury complex. Housekeeping confirmed that her clothes were missing from the closet. Her phone charger and travel bag had also vanished. But her phone itself remained untraceable, switched off, unreachable, dead. Rafael's first instinct was to think something terrible had happened. Kidnapping? Foul play? But then the security team accessed the CCTV footage, and what they found changed the tone of the search entirely. At exactly 3:17 a.m., Lunara was seen leaving through the staff service corridor at the back of the resort. She wore a gray hoodie, fitted jeans, and sneakers. Her hair was tied up, face partially concealed under the hood. She carried a simple shoulder bag and walked with urgency but not panic. No one followed her. No vehicle was seen waiting. She simply disappeared into the early morning streets. Detective Simra Holt was brought in that afternoon. Her background in missing persons and international fraud made her uniquely qualified for strange disappearances. Upon reviewing the footage and questioning the staff, she quickly moved to examine Lunara's identity. It was standard protocol. Confirm the missing person's legal details, emergency contacts, and travel documentation. But what should have taken minutes turned into an unraveling. Lunara's passport had errors, small but suspicious. The font on the document was slightly misaligned, and the embedded security chip failed to register. Her visa application had no digital record. When Holt ran her name, Lunara Vena, through government databases, there was no match. Not in marriage registries, not in immigration logs, not even in medical databases. It was as if she didn't exist. Or, more accurately, had never existed under that name. Holt then ran facial recognition through various international databases used to track identity fraud. Within an hour, a match came back, a man named Lir Vena with records in South America, Europe, and Southeast Asia. The face in those files, though subtly altered in Lunara's wedding photos, was unmistakably the same. Lear had used different names over the years, most commonly in high-end social circles. His typical targets were wealthy individuals with reputations to protect, people less likely to go public when conned. In every case, he built trust, gained access, and vanished. This time, the story had taken a darker turn. No money had exchanged hands. Rafael had not altered any assets or signed over business rights. There were no suspicious withdrawals or changed policies. If this wasn't about financial gain, what was the motive? Rafael, devastated, sat with police and rewatched the footage repeatedly. The woman he had believed he married wasn't real. Every memory from the last 6 months, every dinner, every conversation, every moment, had been carefully curated. A role, a performance. Rafael's embarrassment slowly turned into suspicion. He remembered how Lunara once insisted on using his laptop to send an urgent email while they were traveling, how she'd taken an odd interest in the resort's financial systems, asking questions that had seemed harmless at the time. Holt took note. The case was no longer about a missing bride. It had become a matter of deception, digital intrusion, and corporate espionage. They widened the investigation. Lear Vena hadn't just stolen a man's heart. He may have stolen something far more damaging. Authorities began tracing Liar's escape route using traffic camera networks, credit, card activity, and ride-sharing platforms. Piece by piece, they reconstructed his exit path. He had hailed a car to the central train station, boarded a regional train with a fake ID, and was last seen getting off 2 cities away. After that, he vanished. No digital footprint. No purchases. No CCTV matches. Detective Holt requested assistance from Interpol. Rafael's story was already hitting whispers in private business circles. A powerful man had been fooled. A wedding had become a ghost story. And behind it all was a figure who was always one step ahead, wearing the perfect disguise. Detective Simra Holt dove into Liar Vena's past with a growing sense of urgency. This wasn't a simple case of a runaway bride or a cold-footed newlywed. This was something far more calculated, layered, and practiced. As she traced his digital history, fragments of his past lives began to surface, pieces of a global puzzle spanning continents and false identities. He had operated under at least 7 different names in the past decade, each with carefully crafted personas. Liar wasn't just a scammer. He was an illusionist, a social engineer, someone who studied human weakness and wore it like a costume in Buenos Aires. He had posed as a French medical researcher and charmed a wealthy hospital director. In Prague, he claimed to be an interior designer from Italy and lived for 4 months in the penthouse of a real estate magnate. In each case, the ending was the same: no violence, no confrontation, just sudden disappearance after gaining access to confidential information or strategic connections. Authorities had been unable to pin serious charges on him. His victims, often wealthy and socially prominent, had remained silent. Shame, fear of public humiliation, and lack of clear financial theft kept them from filing official complaints. He knew exactly how much to take, never enough to leave a legal trail, but enough to cause damage. But this time was different. Rafael Denz was no ordinary victim. His resort chain was a billion-dollar brand with global ties, sensitive financial data, and proprietary development plans. And Lear had married him, gaining an unprecedented level of access to his personal and professional life. Detective Holt focused on the one moment that could provide a breakthrough: the night Lear used Rafael's laptop. It happened in Dubai, 2 months before the wedding. She had insisted she needed to send a visa application, and Rafael, distracted, handed over his unlocked device. Cybercrime analysts confirmed that within 15 minutes of that session, malicious software had been installed. It was a type of silent data miner, small, nearly invisible, capable of collecting login credentials, financial records, and correspondence. It had relayed data to an external server registered in a non-cooperative country. Rafael had unknowingly handed over the keys to his business empire. Camden Rowe, Rafael's lifelong friend and best man, offered another critical clue. He recalled that during the bachelor weekend, Lunara had seemed unusually interested in conversations about a rival hospitality group. She'd asked about their locations, contracts, and internal conflicts. At the time, Camden thought she was just trying to engage with Rafael's world. In hindsight, it was obvious. She was extracting information. Every compliment, every gesture of interest had a purpose. Detective Holt began connecting the dots. The competitor Rafael had mentioned, Calera International, had been trying to outbid him for 2 major resort locations in Southeast Asia. Their bids, surprisingly, had mirrored Rafael's projections and internal strategies to uncanny accuracy. Someone had been feeding them confidential data. Lear had likely made a deal with Kalira or an associate with interest in sabotaging Rafael's growth. In exchange for a fake marriage and 6 months of deception, he had sold access to insider knowledge. The motive was now clear. It was never about love. It wasn't just about conning Rafael emotionally or financially. It was a surgical targeted operation designed to penetrate a high-profile empire. Rafael had been handpicked not for who he was as a person, but for what he controlled. A soft-spoken, emotionally wounded man with assets, influence, and a desperate desire for connection. Was the perfect mark. Detective Holt assembled her findings into an international bulletin. Lear Vena was now wanted not just for fraud and identity theft, but for cybercrime and corporate sabotage. Interpol added him to their red notice list, but tracking him was no simple task. Lear had vanished before, and every time he re-emerged in a new body, a new voice, a new story. Authorities began reviewing recent marriages, legal changes of name, and passport applications in nearby countries, but there were no immediate leads. Rafael withdrew from public life, humiliated and furious. His wedding had been a heist, his marriage a weapon. And now, the man behind it all was out there somewhere, possibly already crafting his next role, scanning for his next target. Lear had not just escaped. He had succeeded. Detective Simra Holt intensified the investigation, fully aware that time was slipping through her fingers. Every hour Lear Vena remained free was an opportunity for him to shed his identity and become someone else. She knew. He was a master of disguise, not just in appearance, but in behavior, speech, and demeanor. He didn't just impersonate people, he became them. To catch someone like that required more than standard police work. It required anticipation, intuition, and the ability to see through masks that others didn't even notice. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. A transit camera operator flagged a low-resolution still from a security feed in a small town 3 hours from the city. It showed a person resembling Lear now, dressed in simple khaki pants, a cap, and carrying a duffel bag, walking through a rural bus terminal. The photo wasn't definitive, but the posture and facial structure matched. Detective Holt rushed a team to the town. Locals were questioned, and taxi drivers were interviewed. A driver confirmed dropping off a quiet traveler who paid in cash and asked to be left near the edge of town. He didn't give a name but spoke fluent French and mentioned needing to lay low. Holt's team found an abandoned cabin at the edge of the woods nearby. Inside, it was nearly empty, just a sleeping bag, a laptop with the hard drive removed, and a burnt pile of clothing in a metal barrel out back. Among the ashes were fragments of a woman's wig, pieces of melted synthetic fabric from what appeared to be Lunara's gown, and a half-destroyed flash drive. Forensic analysts carefully extracted what they could from the charred device. Some files were corrupted, but others were partially intact enough to send a ripple through the investigation. The files revealed internal documents from Rafael's resort chain, detailed financial projections, email logs, and private development plans for new international locations. But there was more. Buried in the fragments was a string of encrypted emails sent to a private server registered offshore. The language was cold, professional, and clear. Lear hadn't acted alone. He had been commissioned. One name appeared multiple times in the headers, Caro Wells. It was a shell corporation suspected of facilitating illicit information trades across borders, while its public front dealt in consulting and overseas contracting. Intelligence agencies had quietly tracked it for years as a laundering point for sensitive corporate and political data. Lear had likely sold Rafael's secrets in exchange for a handsome payout. The situation had now escalated beyond personal betrayal or business fraud. It was a full-scale operation involving transnational cybercrime. Holt contacted cybersecurity units and filed an official collaboration request with Europol. The theory was becoming clear. Leyer was not just freelancing anymore. He had entered a professional sphere of digital espionage, blending romance scams with corporate theft in a new, sophisticated form of modern crime. Back in the city, Rafael was brought in for a private briefing. His face was pale as he listened. The man he had loved and married had used him to deliver a crippling blow to his company. It wasn't about money, it was about sabotage. His projects in Asia were delayed, partners were withdrawing, and his credibility was being questioned. Even though Leyer hadn't taken anything from Rafael's bank accounts, the damage done to his name and network was costing him millions. And there was no undoing it. Despite international cooperation, Leyer remained out of reach. His digital presence went completely dark. No emails, no online activity, no credit card usage. Investigators suspected he had crossed the border using yet another forged identity. Witness accounts from nearby towns reported seeing someone fitting his description boarding a train to a southern port city known for unregulated cargo ship movement. If he had made it onto a freighter, he could be anywhere by now. The media began catching wind of the scandal. Anonymous leaks hinted at the bizarre truth behind Rafael's short-lived marriage. While most tabloids fixated on the gender deception, the real story was buried deeper: how a con artist had weaponized love, trust, and a wedding to infiltrate a business empire. Detective Holt updated the case file with a new classification: cross-border cyber espionage using social engineering. The hunt was now global. But with no face to follow and no name to trace, the man once known as Liar Vena had become exactly what he intended: unreachable, unknowable, and invisible. The investigation had reached its peak, but Detective Simra Holt knew the reality: Liar Vena was gone. Like smoke, he had slipped through the cracks of borders, identities, and surveillance. Every trace of his presence was carefully erased. Every alias he had used had either gone cold or been replaced. The final clue, a train ticket to a southern port city, was the last verified movement investigators could track. From there, it was as if the earth had swallowed him. Satellite surveillance over the port revealed hundreds of freighters departing in various directions, none requiring passport checks or biometric confirmation. Some ships headed to North Africa, others to Southeast Asia, and several toward South America. Any of them could have been his escape route. And with each passing day, the trail grew colder. Rafael Denz watched the news in silence. The story had leaked entirely now. What began as whispers in elite business circles had become a viral media spectacle. Headlines exaggerated every detail. Groom marries man in disguise. Luxury resort mogul fooled by transnational con artist. Spy in a wedding dress. What hurt Rafael most wasn't the deception itself, it was the ridicule. The smirks on talk shows, the gossip blogs picking apart photos from his wedding day, the anonymous online comments mocking him for being fooled. He had loved deeply, sincerely and blindly. Now the world saw him not as a victim, but as a fool. The resort business suffered. Investors hesitated. Partners withdrew. And Rafael, once the confident face of the company, withdrew from public life entirely. He stopped attending board meetings, pulled out of interviews, and moved into a private estate far from the city. Camden Rowe attempted to reach out, but Rafael rarely answered calls. Farah, his sister, visited occasionally, offering quiet support. But her own guilt weighed on her. She had suspected something was wrong and said nothing loud enough to stop it. Detective Holt, meanwhile, refused to close the case. She kept the file active and checked in weekly with Interpol, Europol, and private intelligence firms. Leyer's name continued to appear on red notice alerts, and his profile was added to blacklists across several countries. Still, no new information came in. It was as if he had retired or vanished permanently. But Holt didn't believe that. People like Leyer didn't stop. They adapted, evolved, and moved on to the next opportunity. Somewhere in another country, perhaps even living under a new gender and name, Layer was likely already weaving his next web of deceit. Then, 3 months after his disappearance, an encrypted message appeared on a dark web communication channel used by whistleblowers and cybercriminals. It was unsigned, but its language was eerily familiar. It referenced hospitality, chains, internal sabotage, and a perfect storm and silence. Investigators believed it was written by Layer, indirectly bragging about what he'd done without exposing himself. It offered no specifics, no confessions, but it was his style. Holt marked it as psychological evidence, the con artist not. Only vanished but left behind a trail of echoes, like a ghost whispering to those still chasing him. Rafael, eventually, began rebuilding slowly. The resort chain stabilized under a new interim CEO. Rafael sold a few properties, restructured his investments, and stayed out of public view. Though his reputation would never fully recover, he found solace in privacy. But he remained haunted, not by the lies, but by the fact that every moment of joy, every look, every word during those 6 months had been artificial, crafted by someone who studied him like a case file. It wasn't just a loss of love, it was a theft of identity, of reality itself. In the end, the man named Layer Vena became an urban legend in criminal investigation circles. A wedding dress, a fake passport, and a flawless persona had taken down a powerful man without a single drop of blood spilled. No fingerprints, no violence, no trace. Just silence where a life once was. Detective Holt kept the case file open on her desk, not because she expected him to be caught, but because she wanted the world to remember. Not all crimes begin with a gun. Some begin with a smile,